Welcome to another inspiring story that will touch your heart. Today, we bring you the journey of an 18-year-old girl whose life was shattered after a tragic accident until a poor mechanic stepped in and changed everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. In Denver, Colorado, the crisp air of early autumn carried with it both beauty and tragedy. For 18-year-old Emily Carter, this season marked the beginning of a chapter she never imagined. Just a few months earlier, Emily had been a vibrant high school senior, full of energy and plans for the future. She was known for her graceful dancing, her laughter that echoed through hallways, and her ability to light up any room she entered. Her dream was to attend Juilliard and pursue a career as a professional dancer. But life has a way of shifting directions in the most unexpected and painful ways. One rainy evening, Emily's world was torn apart in an instant. She had been riding home from a late-night rehearsal, her heart still pounding from the rhythm of music and movement. The car she was in was struck violently at an intersection by a speeding truck. The crash shattered metal, glass, and dreams all at once. Emergency sirens pierced the air as bystanders screamed. Emily, barely conscious, felt her body trapped beneath twisted wreckage. She didn't yet know that her spine had suffered irreversible damage. What she did know was that the girl who lived for dancing would never step on a stage again. After long weeks in the hospital, Emily was discharged with a reality that weighed heavier than any physical pain. She was paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair that felt more like a cage than a tool. Doctors assured her she could adapt and live a fulfilling life, but their words felt hollow. The standard wheelchair provided by the hospital was clunky, uncomfortable, and constantly malfunctioning. It squeaked with every movement, the wheels often catching against uneven pavement. For Emily, every attempt to regain independence only reminded her of what she had lost. At home, Emily's world grew quieter and smaller. Her once lively social circle seemed to vanish overnight. Friends who used to call daily slowly disappeared, their excuses vague and their visits rare. Even her wealthier relatives, who had once boasted about her achievements, now avoided her altogether. She noticed how invitations stopped arriving, how text messages dwindled, and how pity replaced admiration in the eyes of those who did show up. Emily, who had once been celebrated for her talent and spirit, now felt like a burden. Nights stretched endlessly as she stared at the ceiling, replaying memories of dancing across a polished stage, her body moving freely, her soul soaring. Her mother, though loving, struggled to hide her exhaustion. Bills piled up from medical treatments, and insurance barely covered the essentials. Emily could see the toll it was taking, which only deepened her guilt. She often pretended to be asleep when her mother cried quietly in the kitchen. The weight of knowing she caused unspoken suffering crushed Emily more than the paralysis itself. Every day she wondered if her life still held value. She wondered if the universe had stolen her gift, only to leave her broken and forgotten. Despite her despair, Emily tried to step outside, desperate for a taste of the world she once knew. But every trip ended in frustration. The heavy chair dragged against curbs, its wheels catching on cracks in the sidewalk. People glanced at her with discomfort or worse, pity. Some offered half-hearted smiles, but most simply looked away, pretending not to notice. It was as though her disability made her invisible, unworthy of acknowledgement. Emily hated the stairs almost as much as the silence. She longed for someone to see her, not as the girl in a chair, but as Emily, the dancer, the dreamer, the human being still alive inside. One particularly bleak afternoon, the sky opened up with heavy rain. Emily had insisted on taking a short trip to the corner store alone. Halfway there, the right wheel of her chair jammed on a patch of uneven sidewalk, throwing her off balance. She struggled to free it, her hands trembling, her body aching, but the chair wouldn't budge. Rain soaked her hair and clothes, plastering her to the seat. Cars passed by, their headlights glaring through the storm, but no one stopped. People walked quickly under umbrellas, some glancing at her, then looking away. Emily's chest tightened, tears mixing with rain. For the first time since her accident, she let herself sob openly in public, her cries drowned out by the storm. In that moment, she felt completely abandoned. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who once drew applause and admiration, now reduced to a helpless figure stuck in the rain. She wondered if this was all her life would be. Struggles with a broken chair, pity from strangers, and a future that felt stolen before it even began. She wanted to scream at the world for its cruelty, for moving on without her. But her voice broke into whispers as she muttered, "Why me?" The question dissolved into the air, unanswered. Back home later that night, Emily wrapped herself in blankets, still shivering from the cold rain and the deeper chill of hopelessness. She thought about the faces of her old friends, about the dreams she once had pinned to her bedroom wall. Posters of dancers still hung there, mocking her with their elegance and grace. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself back on stage, her body moving fluidly, the audience clapping in rhythm. But when she opened her eyes, she saw only the clunky wheelchair in the corner, its worn wheels dripping mud onto the floor. Reality cut sharper than glass. The following days blurred together. Emily's mother encouraged her to keep trying, to stay strong, but her words barely penetrated the fog of despair. Emily went through motions, getting dressed, eating meals, forcing smiles, but inside she felt like a shell. She avoided mirrors, unable to bear the sight of herself sitting in what she now called her iron prison. Every creak and squeak of the chair felt like a cruel reminder. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like to disappear entirely, to fade away, so that her mother wouldn't have to bear the burden of caring for her. The thought frightened her, but it lingered nonetheless. Still, deep inside, a tiny spark of her old self refused to die. Emily wasn't sure why, but despite the loneliness and pain, part of her still longed for connection, for freedom, for a life beyond the chair. She didn't yet know that fate had already set something in motion. She didn't know that her cry in the rain had been noticed, that her suffering wasn't invisible after all. In the quiet corners of Denver, a stranger with grease-stained hands and an open heart was about to step into her life. Emily couldn't see it yet, but the story of the poor mechanic and the broken girl was only beginning. Just when Emily thought her world had shrunk to nothing but sorrow, fate sent an unexpected stranger her way. It happened on another dreary afternoon in Denver, the kind of day where the clouds hung low and people hurried past without noticing much of anything. Emily's wheelchair had given out again, this time in front of a small gas station on the corner. She sat there, frustrated and humiliated, wondering if she should call her mother or try dragging herself home somehow. That's when she noticed a figure approaching from across the lot, a young man wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. His name was Ryan Walker, a 24-year-old mechanic who spent most of his days fixing cars that others had long given up on. His clothes bore the marks of his trade, darkened with oil and dust, but his eyes carried something Emily hadn't seen in months, genuine kindness. He didn't glance at her with pity or rush past as others had done. Instead, he crouched down beside her broken wheelchair and asked gently, "Mind if I take a look?" His tone was calm, respectful, and without judgment. For a moment, Emily hesitated, unsure if she could trust this stranger, but something about Ryan's steady presence put her at ease. Reluctantly, she nodded. He leaned in, examining the bent wheels and rusted joints with the practiced hands of someone who'd taken apart thousands of machines. Emily watched silently, both hopeful and guarded. She had been let down too many times before. Why would this mechanic care about her struggles when so many others had turned their backs? Yet Ryan worked quickly, improvising with a few tools from his pocket, tightening loose bolts and adjusting the frame. Within minutes, the chair rolled again, albeit stiffly. For the first time in weeks, Emily smiled faintly. "There," Ryan said, standing up and brushing off his hands. "It's not perfect, but it should get you home without falling apart." His words carried no expectation of thanks, but Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. No one had stopped for her in so long, and now this stranger had not only noticed, but helped. Before she could respond, Ryan added, "Honestly, this thing isn't built for you. If you don't mind, I think I can build something better." The certainty in his voice stunned her. No one had ever spoken with such confidence about her needs. Not doctors, not relatives, not even herself. Over the following days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the young mechanic. True to his word, Ryan reached out and invited her to his garage. It was small, tucked between an old diner and a laundromat, with the smell of motor oil clinging to the air. Emily was nervous at first, unsure what to expect. But Ryan greeted her with an easy smile and a promise. "We'll make something that fits you, not the other way around." For the first time since her accident, she felt seen, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who deserved solutions designed with care. Ryan worked tirelessly, often late into the night, sketching ideas on scrap paper and rummaging through piles of discarded parts. He had no fancy equipment, no high-tech workshop, just determination, creativity, and a deep desire to help. Emily watched as he turned old motors, lightweight metal frames, and salvaged wheels into something extraordinary. At first, she doubted it would ever work, but each visit proved her wrong. Slowly, piece by piece, the outline of a new wheelchair began to emerge, not clunky and restrictive like the hospital's, but sleek, sturdy, and customized for her body. During these visits, something else began to grow between them. Emily, who had once locked herself away in silence, started to laugh again. Ryan treated her not with pity, but with respect, often teasing her gently, as though she were any other young woman and not defined by her chair. She found herself opening up, sharing stories of her dancing days, her dreams, and her fears. Ryan listened attentively, never once interrupting, never once making her feel small. In turn, he shared pieces of his own life, a childhood of hardship, parents who had struggled to make ends meet, and his decision to become a mechanic so he could create opportunities where none seemed to exist. Each day, Emily spent at the garage chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. She noticed the way Ryan's eyes lit up when a design worked, the way his hands moved with quiet precision, the way he seemed to believe in her even when she doubted herself. For Ryan, the project wasn't just about building a machine. It was about restoring dignity to someone who deserved more than the world had given her. And though he never said it out loud, Emily could feel that working on the chair gave him purpose too. One evening, after hours of watching him work, Emily asked softly, "Why are you doing this for me?" Ryan paused, setting down a wrench, his brow furrowed in thought. "Because you deserve better," he said finally. "I've seen too many people struggle because the world didn't care enough to help. But I do care, and if I can use what I know to make even a small difference, then it's worth it." His words struck her deeply. No one had spoken to her like that before, with sincerity, without strings attached, without pity. Weeks passed, and the chair took shape. It was lighter than anything she had used before, with smooth rolling wheels and a supportive frame designed to fit her perfectly. Ryan even added small touches, handles that folded neatly, a cushion tailored for her posture, and a discreet motorized feature powered by repurposed car parts. When Emily finally sat in it for the first time, she gasped. The chair glided effortlessly across the garage floor, responding to her movements with ease. For the first time since her accident, she felt a flicker of freedom. She looked up at Ryan, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ryan smiled but shook his head. "It's not perfect, it's just the beginning. You're going to go places in this thing, and I'll keep improving it as long as you let me." Emily laughed through her tears, a sound that filled the small garage with warmth. At that moment, she realized how much had changed. She was no longer the invisible girl people passed by on the street. She was Emily again, a young woman with strength, hope, and a friend who believed in her. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Emily and Ryan deepened. She visited the garage often, not just to see the progress on her chair, but because it had become a place where she felt alive again. Together, they shared stories, meals, and dreams. Ryan discovered joy in her laughter, while Emily discovered comfort in his unwavering presence. Though neither spoke of it openly, both knew something extraordinary was growing between them, something built not just from spare parts and hard work, but from kindness, respect, and the courage to believe in each other. And so, what began as a broken moment on a rainy street transformed into the start of something far greater. A girl who thought the world had abandoned her found hope in the hands of a mechanic who refused to walk past. A chair made of scrap became a symbol of resilience and friendship. And though Emily couldn't yet see it, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The day finally arrived when Ryan called Emily to the garage with a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. Weeks of work, late nights, and endless adjustments had led to this moment. The custom-built wheelchair stood gleaming under the soft light, sleek and strong, a far cry from the heavy, uncomfortable chair that had once chained her spirit. Ryan wiped his hands nervously on his jeans, watching as Emily wheeled closer in her old chair. His heart pounded, not from doubt in his work, but from the hope that this creation would give her back something priceless: freedom. Emily stared at the new chair, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't just a machine, it looked like it belonged to her, crafted with care and precision, almost like an extension of who she was. The frame was lightweight, polished to a silver sheen, with smooth wheels and padded handles. Ryan had thought of everything: adjustable seating, motor assistance, even a discreet suspension system to make rough sidewalks easier. She looked at him, speechless, as he simply gestured with a quiet smile. "Go ahead, it's yours." His voice trembled ever so slightly with emotion. With Ryan's help, Emily shifted into the new chair. The moment her body settled, she felt the difference. The seat supported her perfectly, the controls were effortless, and the wheels moved as though they were gliding on air. She gave a small push, and the chair rolled forward smoothly, almost like it had been waiting for her all along. Tears welled up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. For the first time since the accident, she felt something she thought she had lost forever: independence. Ryan walked beside her as she ventured out of the garage and onto the quiet street. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in golden hues, and Emily felt the wind brush through her hair as she picked up speed. The chair responded to her every movement with grace, as though it understood her. She laughed, a sound so full of joy it startled her mother, who had come along to watch. For months she had seen Emily sink into despair, but now her daughter glowed with life again. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Thank you, Ryan. You gave her back her world." The three of them made their way to the nearby park, where children played and families strolled. As Emily wheeled across the grass and pathways with ease, people stopped to watch. Some were astonished at the sleek design. Others simply smiled at the sight of a young woman rediscovering freedom. For Emily, it was a moment of pure triumph. She felt the world open up again. The air smelled fresher, the colors seemed brighter, and her heart beat faster with possibility. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. Ryan walked a few steps behind, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets, his eyes fixed on Emily. Pride swelled inside him, but so did humility. He hadn't done this for recognition. He had done it because he couldn't stand to see someone suffer when he had the means to help. Yet watching Emily's joy was more rewarding than anything he had ever experienced. Each laugh, each tear, each turn of her new wheels felt like proof that compassion could rebuild what tragedy had tried to destroy. As the sun dipped lower, neighbors began to gather around, curious about the chair and the story behind it. Emily's mother stood proudly beside her daughter, answering questions with tears still shining in her eyes. When one neighbor asked how such a chair came to be, she placed a hand gently on Ryan's arm and said, "This young man made it for her. He gave her life back." Her words made Ryan flush with embarrassment, but also with quiet gratitude. He had never sought praise, yet hearing it spoken aloud made his efforts feel worthwhile. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some people snapped photos. Others shared the story online, and within days, people across the city began to hear about the mechanic who built a wheelchair from spare parts. Local journalists came knocking, asking to interview Emily and Ryan. At first, Emily was shy, nervous about being the center of attention. But Ryan encouraged her, reminding her that her story could inspire others who felt forgotten. With trembling hands, she agreed, sitting in front of cameras and speaking not of her pain, but of the hope Ryan had given her. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from families with disabled children, thanking Ryan for proving that one person's determination could change everything. Engineers and medical professionals reached out, curious about his design. For Emily, what had started as despair turned into purpose. She realized her accident had stolen her dreams of dancing, but perhaps fate had replaced them with something even greater, the chance to help others find freedom. She was no longer invisible. She was a voice for those who had none. Through it all, Ryan remained humble. He insisted that he wasn't a hero, just a mechanic who cared enough to try. But Emily knew better. In a world where so many had looked away, Ryan had seen her. He had knelt in the rain beside her broken chair and chosen to act when no one else did. That choice had not only rebuilt her mobility, but had also restored her belief in humanity. Sometimes heroes wore uniforms and medals. Other times, they wore grease-stained shirts and carried wrenches. On a quiet evening, a week later, Emily and Ryan sat together at the park. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the air carried the hum of summer. Emily looked at him and said softly, "You changed my life." Ryan shook his head gently. "No, Emily, you changed your life. I just gave you the tools. You're the one with the strength to use them." She smiled, realizing that he truly believed in her, perhaps more than she had ever believed in herself. That belief was the greatest gift of all. As the weeks turned into months, their bond only deepened. Emily's mother often invited Ryan to dinner, treating him like family. The garage became a second home for Emily, where she and Ryan continued to brainstorm improvements and dream of new designs. Slowly, whispers spread about expanding his work, helping not just Emily but others who needed custom solutions. Ryan wasn't sure how far it would go, but with Emily's encouragement, he began to see possibilities he had never imagined. Together, they had started something that could ripple far beyond their small corner of Denver. For Emily, the accident would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She wasn't just the girl in the wheelchair. She was the girl who found freedom again, who laughed again, who dared to dream again, all because one man refused to walk past. The crash had taken her dreams of dancing, but it had also led her to something greater. A friend who became her anchor, a mechanic who became her hero, and a story that reminded everyone who heard it that compassion could rebuild not just a chair, but a life.